Howdy, all you delicious people. So, I'm not going to say the first titleless movie, but I'll probably say Squad a lot. Because I'm kind of leery about uh, saying certain words that might get me flagged by YouTube or whatever to have this video maybe not be monetized. But more than likely, the title will do that in just as well as me saying the word regardless. So, whatever. So I'm going to say what the actual title of the movie is. There's no way to stop it. But anyways, so Suicide Squad movie. God, that sounded like garbage. So going into this Squad film, stupid. This has got to be hands down during a certain era of time, meaning a turnover of time of Ben Affleck being Batman. This has got to be hands down the best DC comic book movie, hands down, during that time period. And even better than, to be brutally honest, the Snyder Cut, which I saw. This movie does not waste time for anything. It also delivers a lot of characters that are making this to be a DCEU completed world, which I really appreciate. We have superheroes that are alongside these supervillains, and I appreciate that. We have characters that we are not aware of, and we really set up these characters perfectly, with the exclusion of, like, well, I kind of wish that there would have been a superhero equivalent to every superhero villain, and there isn't, which I kind of groan about, because I'm like, why don't we have this character? Why don't we have like, why is it that every single time we have these characters, like, we just have to just say, like, oh, well, now they're just in prison? I'm like, couldn't they have couldn't they have given us a little bit of a more backstory? Like, it just kind of feels like we kind of set up these characters to just be like, oh, well, Killer Croc is just a terrifying guy, and here's a carcass of a goat. Here you go. And El Diablo is just like, oh, well, like, we'll give him a backstory, like, later on in the movie, and that's how we set him up. I'm like, that kind of, but if anything, I moaned and groaned to the heavens about how Jared Leto's Joker really just wasn't, really just was drastically or vastly or whatever different than anything that we're used to seeing, with the tattoos and the silver or gold teeth and whatever, and like all that jazz and whatever. But watching this movie again past that point of this first released movie, you know what? I'm completely okay with it. I'm completely okay with the tattoos and the bizarre-ish look, because when looking at it, like, you could have it to where it be that all of these tattoos could honestly be a simple thing of it could be washed off. Just like, hey man, like, we have it to where he could just be like tattooing himself every single day he wakes up. And so they all could be removable or washable or whatever. And so when looking at it, I love this movie. During the Ben Affleck era of Batman, because reasonably, I would say, like, a lot of people would say, oh no, well, the Christian Bale Batman movie is better, or Batman movies are better, or hey, Man of Steel is better, or hey, Michael Keaton Batman original Superman movie better than this movie? Or some people might chime in and say, no, well, it's Wonder Woman 1 or 2. Or Wonder Woman 1984 might be somebody's favorite. And I'll be like, well, I don't like that kind of movie. I like this kind of movie. This movie is fun. Like, this movie kind of very much reminds me of Deadpool 2. Like, this is the DC comic books answer for Deadpool 2. Uh, a bunch of characters that you shouldn't like and you grow to enjoy within this movie on a mission that doesn't make sense. They have a Steppenwolf-esque like villain that doesn't make sense to go against these villains, but I just enjoy it regardless. I kind of really enjoy the setup of this movie. We have Will Smith, who is honestly a really fun character in this movie, and I'm so happy that they were able to get Will Smith to be this character. Interestingly enough, like they were just going to, for the sequel of this franchise, they were just going to recast. Supposedly early on, they were just going to recast Will Smith as Idris Elba. But I guess they just decided, like, well, you know what? How about we just recast the entire squad with the exclusion of Harley Quinn? Because we have to continue that continuity of the Squad movie and then Birds of Prey, which I would just call it the Harley Quinn movie, and then now back into the Squad movie. I'm kind of wondering if they're going to do any continuity between these two films and Birds of Prey. I wonder if they're going to tie Birds of Prey into that other movie. I did not care for Birds of Prey or whatever that movie is to be called, the Harley Quinn story or whatever the heck that's supposed to be. I didn't care for it, and even if I were to probably rewatch it right now, I probably wouldn't be still right now feel like I could be won over by that movie. Um, but people feel differently. People might hate this film and love Birds of Prey. It could be a human response that people could have. So, uh, reasonably, I like Ben Affleck Batman in this movie. Yeah, he doesn't have a lot to do in this film, but I like him in this film. Uh, I like the fact that we have a lot of continuity going on in here. There's a lot of interesting things to justify from watching the Justice League movie why this movie needs to be a thing. Because when looking at it, like they're immediately thinking, well, what were to ever happen if a man like Superman were to ever go and become evil or go rogue? Like we have it to where we have Amanda Waller that is like cementing. It's like, well, hey, we need a task force of people that we can just use for a short burst of time. And if this thing doesn't work out, then we can just kill them all off. So yeah, such an enjoyable movie, but I think it's now time to enjoy this in spoiler terms. So, best movie, hands down, in the Ben Affleck Batman era, and people might just say, well, that's because, like, this is even after me watching the Snyder Cut. It's still, like, the best movie in my eyes. To say that this is the best, hands down. Just clearly. So let's go into that double five territory, and I hope I do not irritate anybody because they're like, "No, this movie sucks." If that's what you feel, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. If people liked it, it's a fun movie. it's a fun movie. It's one of those where you can kind of take your head and just plop it off to the side and then just enjoy this movie for what it is. And like I would have probably nitpicked the crap out of it before, but watching it now, I'm just enjoying it. It's an enjoyable movie. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So we have it to where Amanda Waller and Rick Flag are setting up this team. Uh, we end up having it to where we are to have Amanda Waller going to government officials saying that, hey, if we have like a Superman going rogue, we need a Task Force X to go and be able to take anything down, and if they don't, then we'll kill them all off. If anything, we really had a really like I remember any of the squad stuff before where squad stuff we end up having it to where we really had to really insert times where people were to easily and quickly get killed off, or we had to really take the time to showcase exactly where the bomb would be implanted in the person's body, or at some points they would take the bomb out of their body to then uh, escape somehow. But that doesn't like we end up having a character in here called Slipknot that isn't going to have much use of this movie because this is a guy that can just climb really well. A guy that can climb really well, yeah, we're not going to need much of that guy anyways. This isn't a rock climbing mission, sadly enough. So somebody had to go, and it had to be Slipknot. So going into this, so we have Amanda Waller setting up each one of these characters to eventually showcase that, okay, Deadshot, we end up having it to where Deadshot is a very successful hitman. He is to go and have somebody wire him money, and then he'll kill a man. Because we end up having it to where Deadshot is telling this guy, it's like, dude, where's my money? Like, I have this guy right here in my sights. You have a 10-second window. Wire me my money, and wire me double because you're stupid. And so we have the person wiring Deadshot the money, and of course, we end up having Deadshot just easily just ricochet off a bullet to kill this guy. And so we end up having it to where Deadshot is walking his daughter home to have Batman just swing in behind him and to start taking him down. And so we have it to where Deadshot falls on his batukas and he ends up tossing a gun out, and he is, of course, with his daughter. And so we end up having Deadshot's daughter, Will Smith's daughter, saying like, "Don't do it, Dad. Like, come on, don't do it." And so we end up having Deadshot going into prison, and now he is, of course, in his cell. He's in a cell by his own, and he has a punching bag. And there's one interesting moment that we have eventually when I have to set everybody up, and then because we have it to where there's one point where like the guys are the police guys are breaking into Deadshot's room, and we have it to where like Will Smith's fists are up, and he's like, "Come on, like come on!" And we have it to where he's like fighting all the guys. And then they drag him, and then they chain him. They like strap him into some chair to get him out somewhere, so he can be able to show that he still has the skill he has, and so on and so forth. Trick shotting and whatever. So let's set up Harley Quinn. So speaking of Batman, so we have to set up that that of course Harley and Joker are a thing. They kind of have to have it to where, of course, they show Harley as Quinzel, the therapist that was trying to cure Joker, but instead the Joker infected Harley and made her crazy, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs in Arkham Asylum. And so we end up having it to where the Joker asks Harley for a machine gun, and we have it to where Harley or Quinzel ends up basically giving the Joker anything that he wants. And so we eventually have it to where there is an entire gang that gets unleashed into this Arkham Asylum. And while that is going on with all these machine guns and panda men and all kinds of craziness, we have the Joker who steals Quinzel to give her shock treatment to turn her crazy. And so we end up having, and here's the thing, in the Harley Quinn cartoon show, they kind of ended up alluding to this one scene in this movie here. And so we end up having it to where Joker asks Quinzel, like, well, hey, would you die for me? And she's like, well, of course. And he's like, well, maybe that's too easy. Would you live for me? And she's like, well, yeah, of course. So we have it to where Joker is to have Harley choose to go and dip herself into the vat of toxic waste, which Joker was, of course, originally to be tossed into. And so when Harley does not come back up from the toxic waste, Joker ends up jumping after her and retrieving her and then kissing her. So we eventually have it to where Harley Quinn and Joker are at some club talking to some thug who I know is common. And so we end up having it to where Joker is kind of setting up that that if you think Joker is bad, like Harley is just as bad. Like don't don't underestimate her, and so on and so forth. Because we have Harley who is dumped into the lap of this thug who again is played by Common, and we end up having it to where this thug is to end up dead just by having it to where disgrace and stuff like that, just kind of treating people incorrectly. So we go on and have Joker and Harley to be on to driving away in some Lamborghini, and Batman is to chase after them, and that is to eventually land Harley and Joker driving off this pier to go into the water. And so Joker ends up trying to grab Harley, and Harley ends up trying to prevent Batman from getting to her. But eventually, Batman ends up retrieving Harley and taking her to prison. So, anyways, we move on. So, we are to basically showcase this character called Diablo, which basically they just showcase that, hey guys, this is a guy that is really powerful with fire. And that's all you need to know right now, because we're going to have a backstory later on in this movie. And like they showcase that he's in some part of the prison where a riot's breaking out outside, and so he ends up just flaming and killing numerous people in this riot that's going on. And so they end up retrieving El Diablo, and he has no interest in doing anything that involves violence. And he ends up writing in the word flames by, because he's not going to be a part of being El Diablo anymore. So they force El Diablo to be in this whether he likes it or not. And so this entire movie is just pushing this guy to do anything because he's the most powerful of this squad, realistically. So Killer Croc is just to be showcased that, uh, hey guys, he's in a sewer, and like that's all that's really set up for this guy. Hey guys, he's in a sewer. He's been in the sewer, and he's a monster, and this prison had made him to be a monster, so he is a monster, and that's all they really set him up for within this entire movie. There's no backstory. There's just like, hey, he's a monster, and isn't that great? That's all they do for this character. So, uh, we have it to where Captain Boomerang is a guy that ended up trying to steal from this bank, and Flash had stopped him with his super speed, and so we end up having it to where Captain Boomerang is like, dude, hey man, I wasn't doing anything. Like, dude, I was just like sipping tea with my mom, and some guy in a super suit ended up nabbing me. Like, what the heck? Kind of having like Captain Boomerang kind of lying about why he was there. So, moving on. So we have Slipknot, who ends up just arriving with this group. There's no setup with him at all. Uh, we also have, I think I'm missing somebody also that may or may not have had a backstory here. The Joker like had completely gotten away, so he is not a part of this squad. Um, uh, Enchantress is a part of this squad. It seems that Enchantress had Monster T was Common's name in this movie. So we had June Moon, who ends up going into some cave that she's not supposed to because she's an adventurer, and so we end up having June Moon going into uh, and I feel like I'm missing somebody. Uh, we have June Moon. Katana. I'll get to that here shortly. So we end up having June Moon going to some cave, and she ends up breaking some uh, statue-esh like thing, which has the seemingly soul of Enchantress come out of this statue to look like June Moon, and just like have the Enchantress go inside of this girl. We eventually seem to have June Moon uh, going and having a relationship with this guy named Rick Flag. And so June Moon and Rick Flag were lovers, and so eventually we had it to where June Moon is like, I would say she's not actually in jail, but she is also being controlled. We have it to where Amanda Waller has the Enchantress's actual heart, and if Enchantress ends up getting out of line, like somebody just stabs the heart until Enchantress gets back in line. So they kind of can control her, but that's eventually going to be a moot point eventually. So if I missed about setting anybody up, then oh well, we're just gonna get to the bulk of this movie, and so I'm probably gonna skip out on, I'm sure, like a character or two here. But anyways, so we have it to where we have a security guard that is going and checking up on every single one of these squad members. And we end up finding this security guard going off and gambling, and we end up having it to where this security guard, I guess, it has been blowing so much money, and I guess because he's a security guard at this prison, he thinks that, well, I'm blowing all this money because I am uh, going to be paid off by these people. And surefire enough, we end up having it to where this guy's debt is needed to be collected, and so we end up having the security guard going like, "Well, gee golly, I don't have any more. I don't have the money. Just no, fund me more money, and then I'll be able to get it for you." And so we end up having the Joker coming in and fulfilling this guy's debt, and we have the Joker who is putting his hand out, and the security guard kisses it, and he's like, "Yeah, I think that you really meant that." And it's like really saying that, like, this security guard realizes how scary the Joker is, and he does not want to mess with him. But also, this guy is uh, a dirty security guard, anyways, and he'll just do whatever Joker wants. So we have the Joker that is going to pass on some things to this security guard. Basically, he's going to give uh, the security guard is going to give Harley Quinn a burner phone, and so that way, uh, and also information. The security guard is going to tell Harley Quinn, it's like, well, hey, there's going to be an escape vehicle or an escape for you coming with this mission. So, like, gear up for that. So we end up having it to where we end up having all the people either having to do their auditions to see how well they can perform. Deadshot has to do all these kind of shots to see how skilled he is, and so on and so forth. And we end up having Deadshot like demanding all of this stuff, where he's like, "Yeah, man, like, if you're gonna have me do this mission, I want to be like released. I want to be free, and after that, I want you to give me my daughter, and then I want like her schooling, like all paid for, like." And if she ever has a point where her grade starts to slip, you just like wipe people that crap out. You just fix that. And so we end up having it to where Rick Flag is like, "Yeah, and we have it to where Deadshot is like, "Yeah, like, I'm making all these list demands and nobody's writing this down, and like, I want this if I'm going to be a part of this team." And we have it to where Rick Flag is like, "Dude, you can't ask for any demands. There's nothing you can ask for." So we end up having it to where Deadshot is like, "Well, no, I'm not asking like you, Rick Flag. I'm asking Amanda Waller. I'm looking at your boss. Like, I'm talking to you, but I'm looking at your boss," kind of thing. So we end up having it to where to prove to this government that this Task Force SX is going to work, we have it uh, to where Waller showcases Enchantress that these people can be controlled, and so we have Enchantress going off, and she what she ends up doing is she ends up, while people are sleeping, she goes uh, and releases her brother, and and tries to find out all information on all of her stuff, where it is, and all kinds of things. So that way she can release her brother, so her brother cannot go out and cause chaos while she's still imprisoned with these people. And because what Enchantress ends up doing is, like the night before, she ends up having a night with Rick Flag, telling him that she's like, hey, like, I'm going to kill June Moon unless you do whatever I say. And so Rick Flag ends up taking the chains, metaphorically, off Enchantress, so that way she can go and find out things about Waller. And so then June Moon comes back to Rick Flag and she's like, oh, I'm fine. It's okay. And if it's ever you having to choose between Enchantress and me, like, just kill her. And so we have it to where so Enchantress releases her brother out to the world, and this brother Egyptian character, whatever this guy is, so this brother, he ends up just like as soon as he ends up coming down to this like subway, he ends up just starts to like consume people and grab people, and then he ends up like tying himself onto this rail and then just like like annihilating his way through this subway train. And I'm like, wow, this visual is like really awesome looking, and so on and so forth. So we end up having it to where uh, eventually Enchantress ends up getting free. And while she ends up getting free, Waller is just poking at this stick because we have it to where Enchantress is to uh, or Waller and Rick Flag are thinking that, oh, well, hey, they're going to uh, have Enchantress uh, take down to take down her own brother, and she won't. Because we have it to where they are to set up like bombs and explosives to take this brother out, and so Enchantress goes along with them to make it seem like she's going to help them take down her brother, but she won't. And so instead, Rick Flag calls and says like, "Hey, she got out, like she's escaping," and so we end up having Waller like stabbing this heart consistently, and Enchantress is going to her brother and saying like, "Hey, help me before they kill me off," and so her brother ends up like healing, like giving her a replacement heart, and we end up having it uh, to where eventually the Enchantress and her brother are just kind of wreaking havoc on this town, turning any person in this city into their rock or gravel looking monsters to go and take down this town. And so we don't see one lick of any superhero in this movie past this point, which I'm perfectly fine with, because I'm like, well, like the Suicide Squad or the dang it, the squad has to. Too late now. The squad has to go and take care of this business. So we have it to where the task force is sent out. They are given their box of goodies, all their stuff that they are known for, their outfits and whatever, are just tossed to their feet, and so they put all their stuff on and they go out to where they need to start taking people down. And we have it within the helicopter ride. We end up having it to where Rick Flag is consistently telling Deadshot, it's like, dude, you're just gonna cut and run, and I know you. I know people like you. When stuff goes down, you're gonna cut and run. So we have Katana coming into this helicopter, and we end up finding out that this Katana is actually a good person. Is a I guess I would naturally assume a good person, and so we find out that Katana goes uh, and kills people, kills bad people, to find the guy that had taken his sword and killed her lover. And so like that's her whole backstory. And so we have it to where um, Katana kind of pulls like a if you guys have you guys have ever seen the Mystery Men movie where you have like the bowler girl where she's talking to the bowling ball. We end up having Katana eventually talking to her sword because the soul of her husband or whatever was in this sword. And I was like, wow, that's actually pretty amazing to just kind of have like a story like that. But anyway, so Katana kind of isn't really exactly a real relevant character within a bulk of this movie. Like I don't really like. It kind of just seems like, hey, here's a cool character, but she's not really showcased well enough in this movie. I don't think. But anyway, so we go off and we have it to where immediately we have people doing bad things, like Harley Quinn is stealing some uh, purse from off this mannequin, and like people are kind of doing like theft-ish like things, and we end up having it to where like Rick Flag is like, dude, that's not what we came here for, and Harley Quinn's like, hey, we're evil, that's what we do. And so we end up having it to where Deadshot uh, ends up kind of noticing that Harley Quinn is getting some texts and stuff, some like heads up stuff, and we end up having it to where like Deadshot knows what's going on with Harley Quinn, and so we end up having it to where Deadshot is telling Harley Quinn, it's like, yeah, everybody, like, stay evil, spread the word. And so we end up having it to where Deadshot is coming up with a plan to have supposedly Rick Flag being killed off and like them trying to escape all this, which they can't do because once Rick Flag supposedly dies, they all die. That's the whole mission, and all the other guys are just kind of cannon fodder, so to speak. They're like, if they die, who cares? Sadly, even though Clint Eastwood's son is actually one of the members uh, of this military crew or whatever. So moving on. So we go on. Oh, yeah, Killer Croc. Yeah. Anyways, so him and his like, yeah, I gotta slither my way through, even though I'm not a slither person. Anyways, moving on. So we have it to where everybody's trying to spread the word of what they're gonna try to do to try to escape. We have it to where people kind of shift to people, and we have it to where Captain Boomerang is not liked by everybody. To where eventually, when Captain Boomerang spreads the word to Killer Croc ends up just shoving Captain Boomerang out of the way, and we end up having it to where Harley Quinn's like, "What did you say?" And he's like, "I don't know. I guess I'm just not liked by anybody." So we go on, and we eventually have these gravel-looking like enemies showcasing, and we have it to where the soldiers are just kind of like, well, hey, what do we do? Like, how should we make our move? And so on and so forth. And Rick Flag hesitates. And so we have it to where eventually these, we'll just call them the Enchantress minions. So every time I say the word minion, like the Enchantress minion is what I mean. So we have these minions coming onto the squad, and so saying a lot of words in cryptic sense, but it is what it is. So we have it to where really Deadshot for the bulk of the point is the one to really act in this scenario. He ends up just like really just killing every single one of these characters, just taking his arm and just killing all these characters. I'm like, wow, this is awesome looking. And like there are some moments when we have it to where Will either doesn't have his helmet on or has his helmet off, and I think it's funny when Harley Quinn, when Deadshot puts his helmet on, she's like, "Well, yeah, pussy." So, pussy cat. Anyways, so we end up having it to where Deadshot goes and basically kills all these characters. We have some villains chiming in, uh, like little by little, but really Deadshot is to really take all these characters out. And so we end up having Deadshot coming back to Rick Flag, and it's like, oh yeah, you better believe that's how I cut and run. Be the like he cuts and kills everything. So we move on. So the uh, we consistently have it to where they are pushing on, and we eventually start to have Harley keep getting texts to tell her that they are getting close to retrieving her, and that becomes a whole thing. So we have it to where eventually uh, Harley is to get a text that they are there now for them, and Rick Flag ends up sending a text to his helicopter, and the helicopter had been taken over, and so kind of maybe skipping some things here and there, but I think that this part is very important. So uh, we end up having it to where uh, Amanda Waller makes her way uh, back to these people, and she is to kind of relay what is to go on, because we end up having it to where every single time that they're in a fight, they have to protect Rick Flag, because it's interesting when we have this first fight out, uh, because Deadshot says like, dude, we need to protect Rick Flag or we all die. Every single time that seems to be the main mission, to where like Deadshot has to remind everybody like swarm around Rick Flag because we need to protect him or we all die. So we end up finding out later that supposedly Rick Flag is Enchantress's weakness because of June Moon. And so that's why Rick Flag, all of these little minion characters going after him, because he's the only weakness of Enchantress. So moving on. So we have Harley who ends up going on to grabbing onto a rope of this helicopter, and we have Joker who has a scientist with him that is, I guess, hacking into uh, the squad's database to have it to where when Amanda or Flag ends up pulling the trigger to kill Harley, the coding doesn't work. And so we end up having it to where Waller demands Deadshot uh, to kill Harley, and he fires a shot that misses, and it looks like it hits her, but then she just dances back up the rope, and we end up having to where Deadshot is like, well, I guess I missed, and then he walks off. To where everybody's like, yeah, like you didn't do it, like good for you. Because Waller was saying like, hey, like your freedom and your kid right then and there if you kill Harley Quinn, and Deadshot does not do it. So we eventually have it to where Waller makes the call to have the helicopter shot down anyways, and that ends up happening. And so we end up finding out later that we get to the point to where Deadshot ends up finding out information. He ends up finding out how much that Rick Flag has actually held from them and lied to them, and whatever. And eventually he confronts him about it. Because eventually he ends up getting some information, I think, from that helicopter, I think, and then he ends up kind of like going on from there. So moving on. So going on into here, we eventually have it to where once the squad really does figure out exactly what their mission is, they are just like, well, there's no way we're gonna win this mission. Like, dude, there's no way, because they don't even know what they're fighting. They just know that they're supposed to go in a certain place somewhere to go after something, but they don't actually know what it is. And so we just have Rick Flag telling them where to go, but they don't even know what they're doing. And so we end up having it to where eventually Rick Flag has to forcibly tell them what exactly they are going and doing, because eventually we have the squad end up into this hotel where like there's an onslaught of these minions. We just have Harley Quinn who just takes this elevator like it's nothing, and she gets attacked by minions in this elevator, which is the probably the best scene. And we have it to where all the Suicide Squad are to meet her up at that elevator, and she's like, "Well, what? Like, I had everything handled." And so we go on, and we have these minions that are just consistently coming in. Like, we have it to where they're trying to protect Rick Flag, and they're swarming him, and they are trying to take down all these minions. They are pushing on to uh, make their way up this building, and eventually they have it to where there's too many to count, to where Deadshot looks at El Diablo and he's like, "Hey man, like, do you have power or not?" Like, because we have it to where Captain Boomerang like puts a lighter next to Diablo and says, "Ooh, I have the same power that you do. Ooh, look at this." So we end up having it to where Deadshot is like trying to get Diablo there and try to get him angry, to just like, dude, you don't have any power, do you? Like you have nothing in you. And so we have it to where El Diablo gets so angry that he ends up flaming up multiple floors of these minions, uh, and Deadshot was just like, "Hey man, I was just trying to get you there because I wanted you to use these powers because I needed you to just kill these people and kill these minions, and that's what I needed you to do." So pushing on yet again. So we end up having it to where Rick Flag spills everything. Plus, Amanda Waller is now with Enchantress, and like Enchantress uh, is just plugging Waller for information, and while she's doing that, she is all knowing of what every single weakness every single one of these squad members have, and so Waller doesn't want to give up anything, but uh, it's going to be a moot point because Enchantress is just going to just probably just suck the information out of her whether she wants it to happen or not. So when eventually the squad ends up finding out that they are going to fight off a witch, they're like, "So what now?" Like, dude, there's no way we're going to win against that. Like, that's not, no. Once they finally get to know the real skinny about everything, and Rick Flag confesses, like, "Yeah, she's my woman, and like, so I went to do this mission because she's the one I love, blah 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 blah." So we end up having the squad just going like, "You know what, like, I am done." Like, for like, we end up having it to where Deadshot mentions, is like, "Well, hey, yeah, for like 2 whole seconds, like, I actually had hope about this mission, and I actually had a hope about whatever." So we just end up having the entire squad all going out to a bar and drinking, and El Diablo asks for water, and Harley Quinn says, yeah, that's a good idea. So we have it to where Rick Flag says that, hey, like, if you guys want, you guys could all go free. Like, I'm going to smash the device that detonates your explosives, and so you guys can all leave if that's really what you want to do. So Rick Flag ends up explaining to everybody the backstory of everything, and he also ends up giving uh, Deadshot his letters that his daughter was sending him every single day, and we also end up having it to where Diablo ends up divulging his story because El Diablo is talking to Deadshot about, like, hey man, have you ever killed like women? Have you ever killed kids? And Deadshot's like, no, I never do that. Like, that's beneath me. And so El Diablo's like, well, hey, if I get mad enough, then like I can't control anything. So we end up having it to where we are to now showcase El Diablo's backstory. So El Diablo had a home with a wife and two kids, and I guess he had been in a gang and so on and so forth. And we end up finding out that I guess El Diablo had gotten very angry one night, and he had just burnt alive, I'm assuming, his family and everything. And so we end up having it to where the squad is just in utter awe of just like this whole backstory, and they're like, wow, this is gruesome. And so we have it to where Harley's like, dude, you need to earn up to that. You need to own that you did that crappy thing. And so we have it to where El Diablo will try to make amends with that. And so we have it to where Deadshot makes this consensus of just like, you know what? Like, I am gonna go and do this mission regardless. If I'm gonna take Rick Flag and drag his butt all the way up there, kicking and screaming over my back, then that's what I'm gonna do. Because I'm gonna prove to my daughter that uh, I'm not a bad guy or an F up or whatever. So we have it to where Deadshot and Rick Flag just make their way to Enchantress, and we have it to where everybody else is just like, well, like, I guess we'll just go. We have it to where Harley Quinn is kind of telling the rest of the guys, is like, well, what? Like, do you guys have anything else better to do? And so we end up having it to where Killer Croc uh, and El Diablo are just kind of following them because, again, they have nothing better to do. We have it to where Captain Boomerang like ran off with his any energy drinks or whatever, but he ended up just kind of coming back because, again, he had nothing better to do, I guess, either. So we end up having the squad making their way to Enchantress. We have Captain Boomerang who ends up throwing his boomerang to with a camera on it to kind of see what they can see. And so and I know there's probably, I feel like there's a big chunk of story that that I completely skipped over. And so if that happened, I apologize, but there's also just a ton of stuff going on in this movie regardless. Uh, but I feel like there's probably somebody that I'm missing that I completely and whatever forgot about through this movie as well. But maybe I'm wrong because I don't know. There's a lot of stuff rattling around in my brain. So going on here, we have it to where the squad starts slowly but surely making their way to Enchantress, and Enchantress knows that they are there. She can sense them. And we have it to where Enchantress gives everybody in their brain the image of something that they all want. For Deadshot, it's Batman being dead. For Harley, it's a white picket fence life with the Joker, who is not the Joker. He's a perfectly normal guy. So Harley wants the white picket fence life with a baby and Joker and so on and so forth, everything to work out. Uh, uh, Rick Flag is waking up from a dream with June Moon in his arms, so on and so forth. We have it to where everybody's having this picture perfect life, so on and so forth. And so we have El Diablo, who is imagining that his wife had never died and his kids had never died. And so we end up having El Diablo saying, like, hey, man, like, you can't trick me, you can't manipulate me, and you can't change what I've done. And so El Diablo ends up just uh, getting out of this magical spell because he is a very much supernatural character as well. So this won't work on El Diablo compared to everybody else. And then El Diablo eventually smacks everybody else out of their daydreams, just like, hey, like, we're back here. Like, don't get tricked by this person. And so while they are trying to get to Enchantress, the real thing is to get to Enchantress's brother and kill him off. We have Killer Croc, who is going with a squad of just the military guys to set a bomb off underneath the underneath this certain part of this corner to where this brother, to where Enchantress's brother is going to get sucked into this corner to then die. That's the game plan to kill this guy, and so we end up having Killer Croc go in underneath the subway first to uh, to get attacked by these minions push the uh, to push the military guys to plant their bomb. And so when we have so I don't even remember really. I think Killer Croc is still alive towards the end of this movie, but whatever. So we have El Diablo that's like, you know what? I'm going to make amends and I'm going to display like my full-on power. You guys are going to see what I can really and truly be. And so we have El Diablo that is flaming on this Enchantress's brother, and we have it to where like Deadshot and everybody's trying to take this thing down, but there's no way they can even get close to doing anything with this guy. And so it's all on El Diablo. So El Diablo like flames this guy, and then eventually El Diablo turns into this big gigantic demon-esh like thing. And so it's CGI character against CGI character. It's Deadpool 2 all over again. And so we end up having it to where El Diablo is fighting this brother, and we have it to where Rick Flag is telling El Diablo, yeah, push him in the corner, push him in the corner. And so we end up having it to where, obviously, there's this kind of back and forth fight, and the guys can blow the charges underneath them. And so Rick Flag is desperately telling Diablo to get free, and El Diablo is yelling, just blow the charges, buddy. Blow it. Do it. And so we have it to where Rick makes the call, the charges blow, and El Diablo is supposedly, I would assume, dead. As well as Enchantress's brother, and Enchantress is like, no, you killed my brother. So we push on to go, okay, well, Enchantress is the only thing left. Huzzah, huzzah. And so we have it to where and there was like a really interesting sequence where like Amanda Waller just starts like popping off people one by one as they start to run away. Like Amanda Waller just starts shooting them off at one point because it's like, oh, well, they weren't really cleared for they weren't really uh, they didn't have really the level of clearance to be cleared for this mission anyway, so I killed them. Like just some people that she was involved in. Like I thought that that scene was pretty awesome, where like Amanda Waller just starts decking and killing people, just whoever. So, anyways, moving on. So we we have it to where uh so we have to where Killer Croc makes his way back to with the guys, and so we end up having it to where they are going to play out this scenario where like we have it to where Harley is like, you know what, like I'm thinking about actually joining with Enchantress. Like I think that like what she's selling is a really good idea. So we end up having it to where they at first try to fight things out, but it doesn't work out. So Harley ends up going like, you know what, like I think this whole like Enchantress thing is a good idea, because we end up having it to where the master plan is to try to get Enchantress's heart out of her so they can go and try to kill her then. And so we where uh, Harley ends up trying to say that, you know what, I think things are working out with this Enchantress. And so we have Harley Quinn who's walking up to Enchantress saying, like, yeah, I'll be a part of your gang or your team or whatever. But then instead, Harley ends up grabbing Katana's sword and uh, cutting Enchantress's heart out, where Rick Flag is just like, yeah, man, she did it. Like, let's do it. Let's kill her now. And so we have Rick Flag tossing a bomb pack to Killer Croc. We end up having Deadshot running to get to Enchantress, and so Killer Croc ends up tossing this bomb pack. Harley Quinn ends up tossing her gun to Deadshot, and so we end up having it to where right before Enchantress ends up going into this little backing of her, I guess, magical whatever thing, I guess her shield or whatever she had there, this magical whatever the heck that background was. uh, Deadshot shoots the bullet that hits the bomb pack that kills Enchantress, and so because we end up having it to where uh, or what is to think to kill Enchantress, because what ends up happening is that Rick Flag ends up getting the heart from Enchantress, and Enchantress is threatening that, hey, I will kill June Moon if you even think to try and squeeze that heart. Like, you don't have the balls to squeeze that heart and kill me because June Moon. So we have it to where Rick Flag squeezes the heart and that kills Enchantress. And so, like, a lot of this movie really very much reminds me of the original Ghostbusters movie. There's also stuff about it that it kind of reminds me of the original Ghostbusters movie, but it also kind of reminds me of the original Power Rangers movie, where they're just kind of where they're like taking on Ivan Ooze's goons and like going through that whole like construction site where they're like taking them down and sometimes failing and whatever. But anyways, the original Power Rangers movie, not the ones with Ivan Ooze and so on and so forth, not the 2017 whatever the heck one or whatever the more recent one was. Moving on, so we have it to where, oh, hey man, like we defeated Enchantress, but at what cost? But we have it to where, bizarrely, Enchantress was like some cocoon of sorts, and we end up having it to where uh, June Moon ends up tearing away this cocoon shell to show that it's June Moon again and that she's fine and that Enchantress is now dead and we have won this day kind of thing. And so it'll be interesting to see eventually if Enchantress is going to be a one-off thing or if this was just to set up to have Enchantress come back as something. Because who knows? So going on into this is basically uh, how it all ends. We end up having it to where uh, Amanda Waller is like, "Yeah, you guys won, huzzah, huzzah for you," and we end up having it to where Deadshot makes even much more demands of just like, "Dude, I want to see my daughter before I go back to prison," and Amanda's like, "Done." And we end up having a bunch of the guys all asking for things. We have uh, Harley Quinn asking for an espresso machine. Oh, and here's the thing: when Harley Quinn is in prison, like I think that's like the funnest looking scene. We have a security guard just going like, "Gosh, she's all kinds of crazy," and she's like doing like acrobatic moves with bed sheets and whatever she could rig as uh, a little like thing that she could hang on. Like I thought that was so interesting in this movie that she kind of rigged up some kind of like circus little swinging thing that uh, she could sit on and so on and so. It looked really cool. So we have it to where Killer Croc asks for like BET and uh, and like Captain Boomerang is like, dude, 10 years off of a 3 life sentence. It's like what a waste. It's like there's like no way I'm gonna be happy with that, and so we have it to where Deadshot ends up seeing his daughter, and then he ends up going back to prison. No qualms, no nothing. Just I guess he'll eventually get out for good behavior, and eventually when he is to get out. But unless they all die, so we have it to where they're all back in prison, all living the high life, and we have it to where uh, we have a security squad in like kind of SWAT like armor, all going to break out Harley Quinn out of prison, and we end up finding out that Joker is a part of this. We were to have assumed that Joker was probably finally dead within this movie, but all for naught. Joker ends up rescuing Harley, and that is to be leading us on to going from, uh, I guess, Squad to Birds of Prey, where reasonably we ended up having that entire movie that tried to skirt around the fact that Jared Leto Joker was not in that movie. Like they could have recasted him, they could have had somebody else, but instead like all you saw like was the back of that guy's head. And that's and like I think like an animated setup of what had happened with her between the movies, and I thought that was garbage. I'm like, dude, you should have done like I already saw like Harley Quinn the show in animated form. Now I'm seeing this, and I'm seeing an animated open to this movie. I'm like, psh. I'm like, you guys could have spent the money on getting Jared Leto. If you could have got him in the Snyder cut, you could have got him in this movie in Birds of Prey. Like, come on, like because when looking at it, yeah, it was sad. I guess they could not pay for a Jared Leto because it's like this is a like, if they would have brought Jared Leto back, I because he was kind of unhappy about the role and so on and so forth. So Anyways, I'm going to get out of here because I spent way too much time talking about this movie. I really enjoyed it. I really liked this movie compared to everything else. This movie has more rewatchability than I think a lot of these super hero movies for DC Comics. Because this movie is fun. You could watch it by itself and not have any ties to any of these other movies, and it'll be a fine setup, and so on and so forth. So I think with that setup, I am going to get out of here. So goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.